Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Check out fullpresscoverage.com for this podcast and other great podcasts. Also, some great articles, some by John Sapichetti, some by other people who I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure they're also fantastic writers. You can also check out the YouTube version of this show on youtube.com/Jet Stryer. You see my beautiful face. You see Sap's beautiful face in front of his blue tablecloth. And yeah, it's great if you want to, see us and pretend that you're like interacting with us in person. Though we're getting close to the end of COVID here. So maybe we can do some live shows, actually, Sap, and people can interact with us in person.
That'd be fun. Absolutely. I'd be all for that.
I like doing the live shows when we were at the Herald and we'd, be out amongst the people. A lot of people hate remotes. I always enjoyed them.
Oh, I love remotes. But first of all, it gets you out of the humdrum of the same thing every single day. And yeah, you get to meet people and talk to them and let you know what you're doing. And I used to always like a crowd around because you'd get kind of charged up. And, if they heard you going at it and disagreeing with you, it was always fun. No, I used to love remotes, especially if they fed us. That was always a good thing.
Yeah, that's the best part. When we did the Boston Food Festival, that was like heaven. That was a great remote. There was before we get into the show, this just reminded me, there was a time when I was producing the Big Show, and there was a plan from a restaurateur in Boston to incorporate the Big Show into a restaurant where we'd be in like a glass sort of like fish tank thing. And then in like the middle of the restaurant doing the show, and all the patrons would be, eating around you and stuff like that. And they wanted to put it in Quincy Market in one of those spots.
That would have been cool.
It would have been awesome. And we had meetings with them and it looked like it was going to go. And for whatever reason, it fell apart. But I think that's still, a viable concept to have like people come and see live radio or podcast shows, while they eat. And if it's a sports theme or something like that, I think it could work. But to get a restaurant up and going in Quincy Market, you need a lot of capital, which I do not currently have.
No, and I don't think anybody's in the mood right now to open a restaurant. We're just trying to keep the ones that are there now afloat. When I was at the Herald, we used to do a weekly hit at South Station. Actually, we'd be there from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
On the platform?
We'd do 3 shows. Right there. Yeah, between, track 8 and track 9. Actually, right in South Station where, you've got like Up on Pan and McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts and all those other things. There'd be a wide open area and they'd set up a table for us. But the funniest thing was people would keep coming up to us because we were wearing headsets. They thought we were like part of South Station. So they'd ask us, when is the train to Framingham leave? And I'm like, no, we're doing a radio show right now. But, we kind of play along with it. And actually it was interesting. One day they brought through the mayor of Nice, France, who came on the radio with us, but we needed to use an interpreter because I have enough trouble with English. He didn't know how to speak English, but we used the interpreter. It was pretty cool, actually.
I've been to Nice. It is a beautiful place. And I would say being mayor is probably a very nice job to be mayor of Nice.
Sounds really good. He was well-dressed. French and Italians are into fashion. I was probably like in shorts and a golf shirt that day because that's the way you can do it on radio. But no, it was fun doing the remotes there because people would say, what the hell's going on here? Like, what's going on? I do remember one time Mike Milbury was kind of walking through South Station. So I'm like, maybe we get Mike Milbury on to talk about hockey. He was kind of an a-hole, which really isn't a surprise.
Wait, did he come on or no?
No.
He was like, leave me alone. I got a train to catch.
He didn't even have a train to catch. I said, Mike, John Sapichetti from the Herald, I don't know if you're still here, but if you're going to be staying around, can we get you for 20 minutes? Nah, man, he just like brushed me off. Kind of like the way he was as a player. And I actually like Milbury as a broadcaster. He lost his job at NBC Sports, covering the NHL. He didn't say much, but
no, he really didn't. It's about like women distracting people, right?
Right, which is, it wasn't that bad, but the NHL on NBC and now ESPN is taking over next year. And ESPN, I think, is a little more tolerant in certain fashions. They weren't with Paul Pierce, obviously.
No.
But, maybe they'll allow any future broadcasters to kind of opine a little bit. That's why TNT is the gold standard, because Barkley, Shaq, Kenny Smith, Ernie Johnson, they can say whatever the hell they want. Doesn't seem to ever get them in trouble, which is great. It feels like a radio show. It's awesome. And that's why we like Kendrick Perkins on NBC Sports Boston because he has no filter. He's not afraid to say anything. Most everyone else on that network is kind of like, part of Celtic Nation, which
Green
kind
Team
of is
USA.
a turnoff.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah, with Brian Scalabrine as the mayor of Green Team USA. I mean, they've never played a poor game, and they've never committed a foul. The other team has committed all the fouls, but that's why we like Perk, because he tells it like it is.
It's nauseating sometimes to hear the broadcast because the team gives them notes like of what they want to hear, and like
Sure.
if Grant Williams makes a good play, it might as well be like the game-winning shot in Game 7 of a finals. If Grant Williams sets a decent screen, it's like, oh my God, the fawning over him doing something.
Yeah, he turns into like Tim Duncan at some point, right?
Yeah, like,
in their eyes.
What an impact he's making.
Well, you brought up a couple of weeks ago that for some reason Scalabrine's not a huge fan of Robert Williams III.
No, he's not.
And since then I've paid attention to that, and you're right. He says, well, tonight's a big challenge. Is he going to be able to combat Joel Embiid? It's like the kid's in his third year. He's still learning how to play. He's 6'8". You think he's going to shut down Joel Embiid? No one in the league can shut down Joel Embiid. So let's hold Robert Williams III to that lofty standard. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I love Perk, because he doesn't really care what he says. He's very comfortable in his own skin. And I love that Texas drawl. And, he's doing it from his home in front of curtains, or it looks like he's in a coffin or a chariot or something. He's awesome on NBC Sports Boston and ESPN.
He's like the busiest guy ever because he does NBC Sports Boston, does ESPN, he does Fox Sports 1. I saw he was doing halftime of like a random Atlanta Hawks game the other day. I saw it too. They just book him to do stuff. I mean, he knows every player, every play in the NBA. Might as well. I'm sure he's making pretty good money doing this too. I know a lot of people are like, I really want Kendrick Perkins to coach right now. I don't think he wants to coach. He's making a huge career for himself in the media. He's quickly becoming one of the go-to voices in the NBA.
Oh, without question. And the thing is, he does this all from his living room or his office or wherever. He's got young kids. One who I think is 7 or 8 is already playing basketball, is already a monster. He gets to see him play.
That's his name.
Stone
Perkins.
Yeah, I mean, he is a big boy. And I think, it's a much better situation than sitting on the bench. He's not going to be a head coach right away. Is he going to be there as the enforcer for the Celtics to make sure that Jason Tatum and all the young players are in line? Yeah, I guess so. But what the hell are they going to pay him? He's making more money staying home.
Yeah, and he can do. And listen, clearly, we talked about this the other day that he placed a call to Jason Tatum, and they talked about it, so he can do it from home. Yeah. He doesn't need to be a coach of the team.
No, he's like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, that's a pain in the ass. This is a much better job to be able to criticize and be all over the place and make money than stick with one team, and you kind of have to keep your mouth shut in that position. No, this is much better. So good for Kendrick Perkins. He's quickly become one of the main fixtures of NBA media, and that's not something I expected him to be when he was a shy teenager coming to the Celtics and barely spoke to media at all. He's really come a long way. So good for Kendrick Perkins. Let's get into some of the news though today, Sap, as this happened the other day, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it yet. Jamal Murray, unfortunately, his season is over, and that probably also means the Denver Nuggets season is over, as he goes down with a torn ACL. It was at the end of the game too, which you hate to see the injury, but like at the end of the game, it's really a bummer. So it looks like he's going to be out for a while, certainly the rest of the season. His season next year might be in jeopardy too. Certainly the start of it, I don't think he'll be good to go. This is typically a 9 to 15 month recovery they give it. And typically from what I've noticed, Sap, is it takes you a full year then again of playing basketball to really get back to form. So it's a big setback. They're not career enders like they used to be, but it does take a while to get fully back from those torn ACLs or MCLs.
Yeah, we saw that with Victor Oladipo, right? I mean, he's missed 9, 10, 11 months, came back, wasn't quite himself, but then in the second year back, he played better. So obviously Jamal Murray's done for this year. Even if he comes back late next year, he's not going to be himself. So we'd be looking at 2022, 2023, right, when he's more of himself. And they do recover from these injuries much more so than they did 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's really unfortunate for Denver because you like them a little bit more than I do. You had them as a real sleeper in the West. I had them as a second tier team because I still think they're somewhat limited, but now losing Jamal Murray, if they can win one round, that would be a real surprise. I don't even think they'll be able to do that because I could see them slipping a little bit in the standings without Jamal Murray, although they did win 8 in a row and 17 out of 20 with him already missing some of those games. But now there's more pressure on Nikola Jokic, who's the front runner for MVP. And I wonder if this injury is going to impede him at all, because if that record continues to go down, that may hurt his MVP chances. Or if he carries them, then the opportunity for him to even put a stronger hold on that.
Yeah, and you would expect the numbers probably will tick up a little bit from scoring wise, certainly, because he'll have to carry more of the load. Murray on the season's averaged 21 points, 4 rebounds, and just under 5 assists on the season. So he's putting up a nice year. I think people are waiting for him to be closer to a 25-point-a-game scorer than a 20-point-a-game scorer.
Yep.
I don't know if he can consistently do that. We saw in the playoffs in the bubble last year. I mean, he was putting up 50s and 40s, no problem. So he's a capable scorer, without a doubt. And it's a huge blow to Denver. He's their second best player. And Jokic, as great as he is, you are at somewhat of the will of, if you have a really good team around you too. You can't just do it all by yourself unless you're LeBron. See, I complimented your guy.
Thank you.
So now I feel totally differently about the Nuggets' chances. They, like you said, if they get out of the first round, that would be a nice story. And they could, depending on their matchup, but no further than that in my mind. So it's a devastating injury in terms of, if you're a Nuggets fan, where you were hoping the team might end up this year. Without Murray, you just don't have enough scoring punch to be able to compete with the big dogs in the West, the Lakers and the Clippers and even the Suns. And now I'd put them below, without Murray, I put them below Portland and Utah too.
Yeah, without question. It was so unfortunate. The injury, as you said, Jet, came with less than a minute left and a loss to Golden State. It wasn't a blowout. They were still somewhat in striking distance at the point. I believe they were down 7 or 8 points with less than a minute left. He goes to drive to the basket, somewhat uncontested, and it just looked like he misjudged his takeoff, so that he had to extend that left leg a little further than he wanted to, and that's where he overextended, and then the ACL tears, and he goes right down to the floor. He's holding the knee. Right at that point, that's not good. That's not a cramp. That's not a bruise, because it's a non-contact injury. Non-contact injuries are the worst, and it's just a shame because he's such a bright young player. We saw last year in the bubble, he and Donovan Mitchell just put on a show in that series with Denver and Utah. And, Denver won that series, got all the way to the conference finals. And he's a player that I think he's continually getting better. This is quite a setback for him and a setback for the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, he's picked up his scoring average this year by 3 points better than last year. He was at 18. This year he's at 21. Like I said, I think the expectation is for him to be closer to a 25-point-a-game scorer in terms of where they want him to be. But it was certainly improving. The consistency was improving. That's been the biggest criticism of his scoring output is, he can put up this huge monster night and then go quiet the next night. And while he's not Denver's best player and he's not even really close to Denver's best player, he's still borderline all-star guy, a guy who is probably the most potent offensive player they have. Jokic sort of does everything, but it's hard to ask him to, because he does so much, to go out and get, 50. Murray is capable of doing it because of his 3-point shooting. So yeah, it kills their ceiling of where they can be. They're still going to make the playoffs. They won't slip out of it. They'll still be, whoever they play in the first round, it'll be competitive. But their ceiling's just nowhere near as high. And as you said, Sap, it puts a lot more pressure on Jokic. I don't think one way or the other it'll impact the MVP race, because he's stayed the most durable of all these guys who are contenders. And typically that gets rewarded, as it should, right? If you're playing more games, you deserve to have more consideration.
He's played every game this year. The other contenders missed a lot of games. Before the season started, we thought it was going to be Luka, but the Mavericks got off to a slow start. He got off to an uneven start. They've caught fire for a point, but now they're going back to being what they are, which is a 7 seed. So I think you take Luka out of the equation. After that, it looked like LeBron and Embiid were going to fight it out. Well, both of those players have missed a significant amount of time, so I think they're out of the equation. We heard about James Harden. I'm going to hold it against him that he bailed out of Houston. that's part of the season that we're trying to vote on the MVP. In his first 8 to 10 games while he was with the Houston Rockets, he just mailed it in. So I've got to take him out of the equation.
And now he's missing time.
Hurt.
Yeah.
Now he's hurt. Exactly. Giannis continues to just kind of plug along and put up the similar numbers that he did in the last 2 years when he won MVPs, the 2-time reigning MVP. But there's probably some fatigue there. Now he's missing games as well. Then you kind of think for a moment, is Kawhi Leonard in there? But Kawhi's still doing some load management. I think
Lillard
had a brief moment where it looked like he was going to be the guy, and Portland slipped a little bit, and his game slipped a little bit. So, and I always throw Chris Paul in there, not based on numbers, but based on leadership. And Phoenix just continues to win. They're right on the heels of Utah for the best record in basketball. And I think he's the difference from last year when they didn't even make the playoffs to this year where they're going to be a number 2 or maybe even a number 1 seed out west. But it's
speaking of Utah, I guess you have to consider Donovan Mitchell then too, right?
You can. Yeah. I always look at him as a little below those guys, but he's another guy that's a constant. I mean, he
best
shows
record
up, he
usually gets some consideration when you're talking about MVP.
Right. I mean, we saw Atlanta have the best record one year. They didn't really have an MVP type candidate. But look, this is Joker's award to lose. He's played every game. His numbers are ridiculous. He's averaging 26, 11, and 9. I mean, those are numbers that we used to see Larry Bird in his prime putting up. He's shooting 56% from the floor, 42% from 3. It's amazing what he's done. And I think
they've all improved
just
from the last year, Sep, that he's ticked up those numbers.
Every year. He just gets better every single year. So, yeah, this is his award right now. And it would make him the rarest of MVP winners. He was the 41st pick in the 2014 draft or the 2014 draft.
We just talked about that the other day, right?
Yeah. And, the lowest drafted player, 2 players ever to win MVPs, Giannis and Steve Nash, both 2-time winners, both were drafted 15th overall. I mean, to go from 15th being the lowest drafted MVP to all the way to 41 is incredible. And he would be the first true center since Shaq in 2000 to win this award. So I think he's going to win it. And it's a very interesting story.
And it'll be the 3rd time in a row that a European player has won. Giannis has won the past 2.
Yeah.
And Jokic will win. Looks like he'll win this one. We talked about earlier in the season, Sap, how it was looking like this was going to be a really heavy MVP award, meaning like it was going to be weighted a lot. We talk about how some championships are worth more than others. Mm-hmm. We like to reference LeBron's when he came back from 3-1. I hate to talk about that, but I agree with you. Fair. Mm-hmm. That's worth more than, one of the ones he won with the Heat. But some MVPs, it's such a stiff competition year that it really means a whole lot. We've talked about this before. It was looking like it was going to be one of those years. And now because of the injuries and all things we just mentioned, Sap, does it change your perception of if it seems like when Jokic wins this award, are you not going to put as much weight on it as what we were talking about earlier in the season?
Yeah, probably, because it looked like it was going to come down to LeBron and Embiid. And then both of those guys have been hurt enough and missed enough games that I think they're kind of out of the equation. Although Embiid's come back and Philadelphia's playing better. Look, if Embiid plays every game the rest of the season, he'll end up playing 54 out of 72. That's 75% of the games. He'll get votes. He will.
Yeah, I still don't think it's enough games.
It's not when Joker's played every game. So there's a big difference there. I don't say it's cheapened. To win the MVP is quite an accomplishment, but it's starting to feel a little bit like the 2012 Republican presidential primary, where every week there was a different front runner, right? I mean, it was, Newt Gingrich was the front runner at one point, and then Herman Cain was the front runner the next week, and finally Mitt Romney just kind of outlasted everyone. I'm comparing Mitt Romney to
Carly
Joker.
Fiorina, right? Wasn't she another one?
No, that was 2016.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm mistaking my Republican primary field.
I was covering all of those things because I love doing politics as much as sports. But now we're going to call Joker Mitt Romney. So that's my reference to that. But yeah, it's not going to take anything away from him because the guy's a great player and he just keeps getting better every single year. But it really did look like this was going to be like a 7-8 player race to the top. And I still think Embiid's going to get some votes, and I think there's going to be some people that vote for Giannis. I mean, Milwaukee's going to be a solid number 3 seed in the East.
Yeah, and
numbers
LeBron
are pretty
too,
similar. LeBron will get votes, especially if the Lakers end up, 3, 4, 5 games under 500 when he's not playing. That's kind of the true definition of MVP.
The way you vote is you rank them 1 to 10, something like that around those lines. I think that's
it's
how
different.
They do it.
Yeah, it's different.
So I assume that Jokic is going to get virtually all the first place votes, probably. And then the second place votes will be a mix between, LeBron, Embiid, Lillard.
Yeah.
Yeah. I right now it does seem like Jokic is here. The next closest guy, maybe Lillard or Embiid, it's a sizable gap.
And Curry's
whereas it was
some
neck
votes
and neck
too.
earlier. Yeah, you're right.
It was. Curry's going to get some votes too. He's had a phenomenal year. It's every bit as good a year as he's had since the unanimous MVP year 2015, 16. But the team's not playing at that high level. So, that will kind of hurt him in voting. It's different than the NFL MVP. We only get one vote, So like Aaron Rodgers was an NFL MVP last year, and he got, I believe, 44 votes. Josh Allen got 4, and Patrick Mahomes got 2. There's 101 voters in the NBA, so you'll see some other first place votes. Last year, I believe it was 86 for Giannis, 15 for LeBron. It should have been closer. There's MVP fatigue with LeBron. There's now going to be some MVP fatigue with Giannis.
And people
it
happens
always
with
forget,
everybody. Happened with Jordan. Happens with everybody, right?
And people forget about Kawhi. And Kawhi's still a great player, but he does miss a little bit too much time, and his game doesn't pop the way some other players does, right? He doesn't pop. He doesn't speak. And he's not exactly going to push himself out there to be an MVP candidate. But nonetheless, he'll get some votes too. But it is a fascinating MVP battle this year. But I would think Nikola Jokic is going to win this thing.
Yeah, I think what'll also be interesting, and we'll talk about this when it becomes closer, is looking at how the all NBA races are going to shake out, because those end up being almost more important than the MVP, because it determines contract eligibility in terms of supermax and stuff like that. So you always have to keep an eye out on the all NBA teams, because it activates things in people's contracts. It creates a lot of different cap scenarios. So we'll talk about that as the season gets to a close. Who's going to make the 3 all-NBA teams, including the defensive ones, because that also activates contract stuff too. So that will be interesting to look at too, because injuries seem to play less into how they determine the all-NBA voting. They seem to not care as much if you miss time. MVP, yes. All-NBA, less so. Maybe because there's more spots.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, you get 15 spots to fill, and obviously we saw last year Jason Tatum was third-team All-NBA, so that made him money with his contract extension. And remember, a few years ago, Klay Thompson was quite upset that he didn't make first, second, or third team, and it kind of impacted his contract. So I do believe that that's more important than the MVP. That's a great point, Jeff, because that's actually putting dollars into their accounts. MVP doesn't hurt either for sneaker deals, etc. But I don't see Nikola Jokic really being a guy that gets a lot of money off the court. Giannis doesn't get a lot either. Maybe the language barrier is an issue, and his game is so sublime. I don't think it really resonates with, say, 12-year-old kids that are buying sneakers.
Well, maybe in Serbia.
Yeah. How big is that market, though?
Huge, I think.
Yeah, it's a huge market there in Serbia. Yeah, it's not China with Yao Ming. Like, Yao Ming became one of the most popular players in the NBA because of the China connection, and I think. And
the Rockets became one of the most popular teams in the NBA because of that.
And I think Jokic is a better player than Yao Ming.
Yao Ming, he's way. It's not even close. Not even close.
But he seemed to start every All-Star game because he was getting the votes from China. Yeah, but Jokic can do so many more things. I mean, just his passing alone is so incredible to watch. But those are all fun things that we'll kind of keep our eye on over the final month and a half of the season.
Yeah, and a guy who's certainly going to make one of those all-NBA teams, as expected, is Luka Doncic, another terrific European player who will win MVPs, plural, in this league by the time his career is over. That I feel extremely confident about.
Never say plurals, though, Jeff, because Shaq has one, Kobe has one, LeBron has 4. But Kevin Durant has 1, and those guys are all good.
I look at the well-rounded game. I think the well-rounded game of Doncic is that, Kobe, everybody looked at, okay, he's scoring. Right. He's not passing. Doncic just, could average a triple-double. I feel very confident. I'm sure the odds would probably be strong for me to bet on that he'll win 2+.
Okay. All right. I think
So I
that's
would
going to
take the
happen.
over 1.5
Okay,
for
I'll be
Luka's
with you on that,
MVP.
but it won't be that easy. Winning two MVPs is not all that
No,
easy. I mean, Larry Bird won three, but I think this guy has such a well-rounded game. You're right. I mean, I could see Luka having a 30-10-10 season. It would not surprise me. He's pretty much close to that now.
yeah, and I have a standing bet with a friend for like, I don't know, $500 that we'll probably forget about
Oh,
time. He took the over for Zion 1.5 MVPs. I took the
ooh,
under. That's another good case.
that's a good one. That's a good one too. Yeah, I think they're both going to win at least one, and then we'll see
Yeah,
what happens if they can win a second.
but right now, like you mentioned, Sap, just a minute ago, Dallas is sort of middling. I mean, in the East they would be in a lot better shape, but they're in the Western Conference.
Mm-hmm.
They're 29-24 right now. They're 11 games back of Utah. Just to show you what the distance is between the top and the bottom of the West. So they're 7th seed right now, a game and a half back of the 6th-seeded Trailblazers. And so they're right in the mix of that dreaded, I guess, play-in spot now.
Mm-hmm.
And Luka Doncic and the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban, are none too happy about that current position, not because it's disappointing, but because they're saying they don't understand the point of the play-in. It's unfair. Mark Cuban went as far as to call the play-in setup a, quote, enormous mistake. And he, expounded on that too. Luka, I guess, just mentioned, said he doesn't understand the point of it. Is this just sour grapes from the Mavericks based off of where they currently sit, Sap?
I think partially, sure. They had higher expectations. And look, they're only a game and a half behind Portland. So if they get to the 6th seed, they don't have to be part of this play-in tournament with 7, 8, 9, and 10 having this, which I think is a ludicrous setup. I'm not a fan of it either, to be quite frank with you.
At
I
all,
think
or would you just like lower, like just the 8th seed to be in play?
Yeah, that might work. And have a 2 out of 3. I hate the one game play-in. I know it creates a lot of drama, but why have, in this case, a 72-game regular season, normally an 82-game regular season, and you have a one-game play-in? Like, I really value the regular season, and I think that's a complaint that people have about the NBA, that the regular season doesn't mean all that much. We've got load management. We've got Kevin Durant, who played 20 games, resting up for the postseason. Now James Harden's taking some time off. Kyrie, has the same schedule as a fireman. It's like 1 on, 3 off. Not to disparage firemen.
I don't know how firemen's schedule works. Yeah, I don't know.
No, it is. Yeah, but they work 1 24-hour shift and then they have 3 days off. I mean, they work a full week, and believe me, they're running into burning buildings. Kyrie Irving can't get out of his own way sometimes, but I think the regular season means something to grow the sport. And all of a sudden you have a one-game play-in. So like Dallas is the 7 right now. They would play the 8th seed one game. If they won, they would be the 7th seed. If they lost, then they would have to play the winner of 9-10 to be the 8th seed. I'm not a big fan of that. Now, Cuban did vote for this, right? As part of the committee that he's on. I think he's backing a star. I think once Luka Doncic said he wasn't thrilled with this, Mark Cuban knows, okay, I don't want to tick off my best player, the best player I've had since Dirk Nowitzki, and I don't want to lose him in free agency a few years down the road. Let me be on the same side as my great player. But I also think the reason I like Mark Cuban so much, and I think he's my favorite owner in sports, he and Jerry Jones, I mean, I probably should move to Dallas. I love both of those guys. He thinks outside the box, but I also like the fact that he's willing to change. Like 6 months ago, this sounded good, but now looking at it with a lot of injuries in the league, a lot of fatigue, a lot of load management, do we really need to have this condensed season?
A lot of COVID.
Where a lot of COVID. Teams are playing 4 times a week now. I mean, the second half of the NBA schedule was even more hectic than the first half. And now we're going to just add on to that. I can see his point at that point, but I think he's just really at this point sidling along to keep his star player happy.
Right. I was going to say, is it him being reflective and saying, oh, maybe this wasn't a good idea on my part, or is it because his star player saying that, and the position that the Mavericks are in right now, which is they were hoping to probably be a 3, 4, 5 seed. Instead, they're at the 7 right now. When he voted for it, I'm sure he thought that the team would probably start a little bit quicker. So it's kind of like, yeah, what would you be saying if your team was the 1 seed right now?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're there saying, really? I mean, we still have a decent year. Like you said, 29-24. They're probably about 3 games below where we thought they'd be. They got off to a slow start. They really have to load manage Porzingis. Some of their other players haven't stepped up. So there have been a slight disappointment this year. And they didn't expect to be in this position. My biggest fear for the Lakers is them falling into this. I think they're going to be just fine. LeBron and Anthony Davis are going to come back in a couple weeks, and they're solidly entrenched in the 5. In fact, the Lakers could move all the way up to 4 if Denver continues to struggle with the Jamal Murray injury. Yeah. Right. So Dallas, they could move up to 6. So now part of the conundrum is now Dallas has to look at it and say, let's bust our ass the final 5-6 weeks of the season to go past Portland. So now that interrupts any type of load management, perhaps, that Dallas wanted to do. So now, well, we want to be the 6th seed, but do we really want to go all in on that and maybe, risk injury? And if we fall short, now we still got to play in that play-in tournament. So there's a lot to weigh there.
Right. Yeah, it does seem like the Lakers are pretty intense in that 4-5 spot, that's where they're going to end up. I don't see them falling below that. And then, the rest of it is a little bit jumbled. In the top of the West, Utah, Phoenix, and the Clippers are all pretty close. In the bottom, Memphis is the 8 right now. They're a game and a half back of Dallas, and Portland is, as I mentioned, a game and a half up on Dallas. So it's pretty close at that 6, 7, 8 spot. The 4 and 5 have distanced themselves, I think, enough to be. That's probably where they are, unless Denver just completely goes down the rails. But like you said at the top of the show, Sap, they've played fine without Murray. It's more in the playoffs that it's going to kind of rear its head, the injury. So I don't see them dropping below that 4-5 spot. That looks like the likely 4-5 matchup, right? Lakers, Denver.
Yeah, exactly. And I would expect the Lakers to go past Denver, would give them home court advantage.
Which was the Western Conference Finals last year, by the way.
Last year. And I don't think home court advantage is a big deal this year, although, you'd rather have the first 2 games at Staples rather than going to Denver and playing in the altitude. Who knows? The Lakers would beat them either way, probably in 5 or 6 games, especially with Murray out. But that being said, how about a 7-8 one-game play-in of Luka against Jamal Murray? Now, that would be interesting. I mean, so
yeah, it would be.
Part of it is very interesting, but I just hate the fact that it's one game. I don't like the one-game play-in in baseball. You play 162 games, you finish 7 games ahead of another team, and they have one opportunity to beat you. It's play one game and you win the wild card matchup. I don't like that. I mean, football, that's what we do, because that's you have to have that, a single elimination in football. But why all of a sudden you have these long regular season and it's like, okay, let's rush through with one game? There is
I agree. It devalues it. It devalues it tremendously.
That's the thing in the regular season, especially in basketball, constantly gets criticized. Like, Philadelphia is playing the Nets on national TV as we record this, and most of the Nets are nowhere to be found. That's supposed to be a marquee game. ESPN pays a lot of money for the rights to the NBA, and they don't have 75% of the Brooklyn Stars playing tonight. That's going to hurt their ratings.
Yeah, nobody's going to watch now because it's nothing.
No, it means nothing. And it's an important game because they're fighting for the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. I mean, I don't want to sound like this old guy, but you know what? I am. I'll go back to the
Except they have the exact same record going into this game. They're 37 and 17, both of them.
And you want to be the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference so that, Milwaukee would play the 2 seed if everything holds to form in the second round of the playoffs. Who would you rather play in the second round of the playoffs, the Celtics or Milwaukee? I would think I'd rather play the Celtics, although they're playing better basketball. But I'll go back to, 1980, 1981. The Celtics, 76ers, and Bucks were always jumbled together in the regular season. Those regular season games meant a lot. I mean, when the Celtics would go down to Philadelphia to play the 76ers or go to Milwaukee, those were 2-game turnarounds because the record meant something. In 1981, the Celtics won 62 games. Philadelphia won 62 games. They were the 2 seed. The Celtics won the tiebreaker. Milwaukee won 60 games. So Milwaukee had to play Philly in the second round. Game 7 was at the Spectrum. The Sixers won by 1 point. The Celtics 76ers conference finals went 7 games at Boston Garden. The Celtics won by 1 point. So one basket separated those 3 teams that year. And a lot of it had to do with seeding. And that was established during the regular season. We don't see that anymore.
Well, look at these 2 teams in Philadelphia and Brooklyn's records heading into this game, Sep. At home, Philly is 20-5 at home. Mm-hmm. Brooklyn is 22-7 at home. I mean, those are tough teams to beat on their home court. And outside of Utah, those are the 2 best home court records, actually.
Yeah.
Well, Utah is an absurd 25-3 at home this year.
Although Washington just beat them. They had a 24-game winning streak at
They go
home, and
figure that
Washington
one out.
went in there. Well, Russell Westbrook on any given night is good for 30, 15, and 15, and Bradley Beal can score 40 in a game, or he's leading the league in
Isn't
scoring.
that's the danger of that one game plan, right? Is you
Right.
catch a team like Washington, or you catch a team in the West like Golden State, and Steph Curry just goes bananas in a game, which he did the other night. He put up 50, I think, the other night. He certainly is capable of it, and suddenly you're out. So I get the complaint. I do think also it does create for more interest, and people will actually watch that game as opposed to the game one in a 7-game round one series. So it's generating some excitement because the game is meaningful, but it does devalue the regular season. And Mark Cuban said, here's his quote: "If we're going to be creative because of COVID, we should straight up go 1-20 and let the bottom 4 seeds play in." So he's just saying, just seed it regardless of conference. This year in particular, do it since the 10 games cut from the normal 82 game schedule were in conference instead of out of conference. So essentially saying make it up in the playoffs. I don't think the NBA is ever going to go to that straight seeding. I think they like the conference balance. There's a travel issue too. Where it gives a team a major advantage if you're, the home team on the West Coast and making an East Coast team travel to you all the time. But, I think that there's arguments for both sides, certainly. But I do feel like this is more based off of where Dallas is as opposed to this is their actual opinion on it. And if they were in a different spot, they wouldn't have anything to say about it whatsoever. So I do feel like, exactly like you said, Cuban's sort of circling the wagons for his star. His star player doesn't like it because he's probably going to have to play in it.
And like Jerry Jones, Mark Cuban knows that people listen to what he says. We're talking about Mark Cuban and the Dallas Mavericks. It's about building that Q rating. I think he's a fabulous owner, and he knows how to stir the pot quite a bit, and he's doing it right now.
Yeah, he certainly, both of them know how to make money. I would say Mark Cuban's done a much better job the past 20 years of keeping his team, at a high level of contention as opposed to the Cowboys, who have, barely sniffed the Super Bowl in 30 some odd years.
They haven't played in a conference championship game yet since 1995. You were 6 years old the last time the Cowboys played in a conference championship game, let alone actually they won the NFC in 95 and went to the Super Bowl and won. That's the last they've sniffed a conference championship game. That's crazy.
Spectacular ineptitude. I mean,
it really
think of the teams that have been there. The Jaguars, I think, have been there twice in that period of time.
Right. I mean, Tampa Bay's won 2 Super Bowls in that time.
Yeah.
One thanks to Tom Brady, but nonetheless, the Detroit Lions have been about at the same level, but at least for a few years they did have Barry Sanders.
And Cleveland, that's a long time to not play. You'd think just by default you get there. But I know we're not a football podcast, but it is.
Nope.
I know you. So you may like Jerry Jones because of his personality, but he hasn't done a very good job running his football team recently.
Not on the field.
Not even recently. 30 years is a long time. It's almost 30 years.
But the value of the Cowboys just run circles around any other franchise in North American sports. Their current value is about $6 to $7 billion, by far the highest. He knows how to make money, build the brand. Sometimes he should get out of the way and let someone else run the football operation. But you know what? He writes the checks, so I guess he's the boss.
Yeah, and in the next episode, we're going to talk about a team in the NBA that just got purchased for a lot less than what the Cowboys are worth, which makes sense. So that's going to do it for us. We are going to be back tomorrow with another edition of the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. You can catch me on Twitter at Jet Striar. It's at the @ JETSTRIAR, and Sap is at John Sap, JOHNSAP 25. The numbers not spelled out 25, just a 2 and a 5 right there. You can find our show on Spreaker and Spotify. You can also find the YouTube version of it at youtube.com/JetStriar. Again, we're the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. See you, everybody.